Professor Tejo nervously adjusted his academic robe as students filed into the lecture hall. His 4 tentacles twitched slightly, a sign of anxiety his species couldn't easily hide. Today's lecture was special, and everyone knew it. Senior students of the Galactic Political Academy had been waiting 3 years for this particular class. "Please take your seats quickly," Tejo called out, his translator converting his natural clicks and whistles into standard galactic common. The blue-skinned professor watched as students of 17 different species found their places. Some floated, some crawled, others walked on various numbers of limbs. Sun Wu, a pale crystalline being from the Andromeda arm, raised a glittering appendage. "Professor, is it true we're discussing the Terran exclusion protocols today?" The classroom immediately fell silent. Even the normally chatty Hyunjin, whose species communicated primarily through constant conversation, stopped her usual background murmuring. "Yes," Professor Tejo confirmed, activating the room's holographic system with a wave of his tentacle. "Today we discuss why humans are banned from all Galactic Confederation military operations." The hologram displayed a small blue-green planet. Earth looked unremarkable, one of thousands of life-bearing worlds in the galaxy. Yet something about this particular world had led the Galactic Confederation to create unique laws just for its inhabitants. "What you've been taught in your basic education is that humans are excluded because they are developmentally primitive," Tejo said, his voice growing softer. "You were told their civilization is too young to handle the responsibilities of interstellar warfare." He paused, looking around the room. "That is a convenient lie." The students stirred. Jinwoo, a reptilian student in the front row, flicked his tongue nervously. "The truth," continued Tejo, "is that humans aren't banned from galactic warfare for their protection. They're banned for ours." The hologram changed to show official-looking documents with prominent classified markers across them. "What I'm about to share was hidden in Confederation archives for 37 years. I have special permission to reveal it for educational purposes. What you learned today must not leave this room." Student Do Hyun raised a wing. "Professor, are you saying humans are dangerous? They seem so fragile." "Appearances can be deceiving," Tejo replied. He tapped at control, and the hologram changed to show combat footage. Several students gasped at the images of destruction. 74 years ago, the Confederation faced a crisis. The Karlax invasion had pushed our forces to their limit. In desperation, military leaders authorized the recruitment of a species that had just been discovered but not yet officially welcomed into the Confederation. The hologram showed a human female in simple armor, standing a head shorter than the Confederation soldiers around her. 50 humans were brought in as mercenaries for a mission considered suicidal. They were deployed to the Proxima Front, where our forces had been stuck in a losing battle for months. Military command hoped they might provide a minor distraction at best. Professor Tejo's voice grew quieter. 3 days later, the Karlax sued for peace. Shocked murmurs spread through the classroom. Youngmi, a gaseous entity contained in a student environment suit, pulsed bright orange in surprise. "But, how?" asked Jaehyun from the back row. 50 individuals against an entire battlefront? "That," said Professor Tejo, "is precisely what this lecture will explain." The humans displayed combat capabilities that defied all our military doctrine. They showed tactical creativity our strategists couldn't predict. They adapted to battlefield conditions in ways our military AI deemed impossible. The hologram shifted to show a human soldier moving with startling speed through a battlefield, using environmental features in ways no Confederation training manual had ever suggested. Most concerning to Confederation leaders was not just their effectiveness, Tejo continued, but their attitude toward combat itself. The display switched to interview footage. A human male, bandaged but smiling, was speaking to an unseen interviewer. "When can we go back out? The squad has some ideas for next time." Professor Tejo paused the footage. This response puzzled our psychologists. Where other species experience combat as traumatic, humans showed signs of what they call combat excitement. Some even expressed disappointment when the conflict ended. The students watched in silence as Tejo switched to a formal document. This led to the creation of the Terran Exclusion Protocols, officially presented as protection for an emerging species, but actually designed to prevent humans from gaining military influence in galactic affairs. A student timer chimed, indicating the first segment of the lecture was ending. "We'll take a brief break," Professor Tejo said. "When we return, I'll show you the classified footage of what 50 humans actually did on the battlefield that so terrified Confederation High Command they created an entirely new legal framework just to contain them." After the break, students returned to their seats with a nervous energy filling the room. Professor Tejo noticed how even the normally sleepy afternoon students were now fully alert, their various sensory organs focused intently on the holographic projector. "Now," Tejo said, his tentacles moving deliberately to the controls, "we will examine the actual Proxima incident that led to the Terran Exclusion Protocols." The lights dimmed automatically as the hologram activated, showing a star system with 7 planets. The third planet glowed red, indicating it was the contested battlefield. "Proxima Centauri 3, Tejo explained. A mineral-rich world that the Karlax forces had occupied for 8 months. Confederation forces had suffered 16 failed attempts to retake the planet." Student Minjae raised a paw. "Professor, why was this planet so important?" "Good question. The planet contained rare graviton crystals essential for faster-than-light drives. Control of this world meant control of 20% of the galaxy's FTL fuel supply." The hologram zoomed in to show the planet's surface. Military bases appeared as glowing points of light, most marked with enemy symbols. The Karlax had established 47 fortified positions across the northern continent. "Our forces were trapped in this small defensive zone," Tejo pointed to a tiny blue area. "Conventional military wisdom said we needed at least 300,000 troops to break the stalemate." The professor's voice grew quieter. "Instead, General Hyoseon made a desperate decision. She authorized the deployment of 50 human mercenaries." The display shifted to show footage of the humans preparing for battle. They looked small and vulnerable next to the larger, armored Confederation soldiers. Their equipment seemed primitive: simple body armor, chemical propellant weapons, and basic communication devices. The humans were briefed on the situation and given 3 days to prepare. Military command expected them to serve as a distraction at best, a temporary diversion while our main forces attempted another frontal assault. Student Jaiwo, whose species naturally processed information very quickly, clicked her mandibles in confusion. "That seems like a waste of lives. Even alien ones." "Indeed," Tejo agreed. "But what happened next changed Confederation military doctrine forever." The hologram showed night vision footage from the planet's surface. The timestamp indicated this was 26 hours after the humans' arrival. A small group of figures moved silently through dense vegetation toward an enemy command post. The humans immediately rejected the direct assault plan. Instead, without authorization, their leader, Captain Doyen, divided them into 5 teams of 10. They infiltrated enemy territory under cover of darkness. The students watched as the humans moved with surprising stealth for creatures their size. They approached a massive enemy structure guarded by towering Karlax warriors. What you're witnessing had never been attempted in Confederation military history: a small team infiltration of a primary command node. Military AI calculated the survival probability at less than 2%. The footage showed the humans separating, placing small devices at strategic points around the base. They moved with extraordinary coordination, using hand signals instead of electronic communications that might be detected. The humans used primitive explosive devices placed at structural weak points they somehow identified without scanning equipment. They timed the detonations to create maximum confusion. The holograms suddenly flashed as explosions erupted across the enemy base. In the chaos that followed, the students watched in amazement as the small human team moved through the base with incredible efficiency. Rather than confronting enemy warriors directly, they used the environment and confusion to their advantage. "Notice their tactics," Professor Tejo pointed out. Where Confederation doctrine emphasized direct force application, the humans used chaos, misdirection, and environmental manipulation. Within minutes, the enemy command center was under human control. The footage showed Captain Doyen using the base's own communication system to broadcast false orders to other Karlax positions. This pattern repeated across all 5 human teams, Tejo explained. Within 72 hours, they had infiltrated and subverted 7 primary command nodes, causing the Karlax command structure to collapse from within. The hologram changed to show a strategic map of the planet. One by one, enemy positions began displaying confusion icons, then surrender indicators. The humans didn't defeat the Karlax through superior firepower or numbers, Tejo said as the students watched in stunned silence. They identified and exploited weaknesses no one else had seen. They used psychological warfare, creating confusion that made the Karlax forces turn against each other in some cases. The final footage showed Karlax representatives signing surrender documents just 4 days after the humans' deployment. In the background stood the 50 humans, all had survived. The Confederation military was both impressed and deeply disturbed, Professor Tejo concluded. These beings had accomplished with 50 what our strategists believed required hundreds of thousands. But it was what happened after the battle that truly alarmed Confederation leadership. The lecture hall had grown uncomfortably warm with so many different species packed tightly together, but no one requested environmental adjustments. The students remained transfixed by the holographic display as Professor Tejo cycled to the next section of classified material. What truly concerned Confederation leadership wasn't just the humans' tactical success, Tejo explained, his tentacles moving to adjust the display settings. It was what our psychologists discovered when they examined the humans afterward. The hologram shifted to show a sterile white room. A human female sat at a table across from a tall, thin being with pale blue skin, a Confederation psychological evaluator. The timestamp showed this interview took place 3 days after the battle ended. This is Captain Jimin, Tejo said. She led one of the 5 human teams. Standard procedure requires all combatants to undergo psychological assessment following combat operations. In the recording, the evaluator spoke in a soft, careful tone. Captain, please describe your emotional state during the combat operation. The human smiled, a gesture many species found unsettling during discussions of warfare. Focused. Clear. Alive. Did you experience fear when your team infiltrated the enemy command center? Of course, the human replied, but it was useful fear. It sharpened my senses, made my thinking faster. The evaluator's notes appeared in a side panel, highlighting the phrase concerning response, fear as enhancement rather than deterrent. Student Yunji raised her luminous appendage. Professor, I don't understand. All species feel fear in dangerous situations. What's unusual about this? The difference, Tejo explained, is how humans process fear. For most Confederation species, fear is a warning system that reduces function. It clouds judgment and diminishes performance. For humans, fear can actually enhance their capabilities. The recording continued. The evaluator asked, "Do you experience distress when recalling the combat events?" Captain Jimin looked confused. Distress? No. Why would I? You took lives during the operation. You were in mortal danger. These experiences typically cause psychological trauma. The human shrugged. This wasn't even particularly intense compared to training scenarios I've run. When can my team be deployed again? We have ideas for improving our infiltration techniques. Professor Tejo paused the recording. This response pattern appeared in all 50 human psychological evaluations. Not one displayed the expected trauma responses. Several expressed eagerness to return to combat. The hologram shifted to show comparative brain scans. Our medical teams discovered something remarkable. Human neurochemistry actually rewards certain types of risk-taking behaviors. The very act of surviving dangerous situations triggers pleasure responses in their brains. Student Jungkook, whose species reproduced asexually through cellular division, waved a sensory stalk. Is this not a form of mental illness? That was the initial assessment, Tejo acknowledged. But further research revealed this is normal human psychology. Their evolutionary history on Earth created beings that not only tolerate dangerous situations but can thrive in them. The display showed another interview, this time with a male human identified as Sergeant Donghee. The evaluator asked him about a particularly dangerous moment when his team was nearly discovered.
"Yeah, that was intense," Donghee said, grinning.
"Heart pounding, adrenaline pumping, everything slowed down in my perception. I could see options and opportunities one might have missed otherwise."
"And this doesn't disturb you? This physiological reaction to potential death?"
The human looked genuinely puzzled.
"Why would it? It's what kept us alive and helped us complete the mission."
Tahoe gestured toward the display. The evaluators discovered humans have a concept they call the flow state, a condition of heightened performance under pressure. Where other species experience cognitive decline in life-threatening situations, humans can experience cognitive enhancement. The professor switched to a formal document with the Confederation's seal prominently displayed. This led to the first major security assessment regarding humans. The report concluded, and I quote, "This species does not experience warfare as a traumatic deviation from normal existence but as an arena for potential achievement and satisfaction.
This represents an unprecedented psychological profile in known galactic species."
The display changed to show all 50 humans gathered in what appeared to be a recreational facility. They were laughing, sharing food and drink, and recounting their experiences with animated gestures. This gathering occurred 6 hours after the psychological evaluations, Tahoe explained.
"Observe their behavior.
In any other species, warriors would be in quiet recovery, often isolated and processing trauma.
These humans are celebrating." Student Hyunwoo raised a wing.
"Professor, this seems unnatural."
"From our perspective, yes," Tahoe agreed.
"But for humans, this is normal psychological functioning. Their species evolved on a planet with constant environmental threats and predators. Those who could function effectively under threat, even find satisfaction in overcoming danger, had survival advantages." The final recording showed a Confederation military leader meeting with human representatives.
The timestamp indicated this was 2 weeks after the Proxima incident. "This is General Wu Jin informing the humans their services would no longer be required," Tahoe said quietly. "Note their reactions." The humans in the recording displayed obvious disappointment. One asked directly, "Did we do something wrong?"
"Our mission success rate was 100%. The general assured them they performed excellently," Tahoe continued. "But the decision had already been made at the highest levels. A species that experienced warfare as potentially rewarding rather than traumatic was deemed too dangerous to incorporate into Confederation military structures."
Professor Tahoe noticed the students shifting uncomfortably in their seats.
The revelations about human psychology had clearly disturbed many of them. He paused to let them process what they had learned before continuing with the next part of his lecture. "What truly frightened Confederation leadership," Tahoe said as he changed the holographic display, "was not just the humans' unusual psychological relationship with combat, but what they discovered when they studied human history."
The hologram now showed a timeline of Earth's technological development.
The students leaned forward, various eyes, sensory stalks, and visual organs focusing on the display.
"This is human technological progression over approximately 3,000 years, Tahoe explained. "Pay special attention to this section here."
He highlighted a small portion of the timeline that covered roughly 200 years.
"During this brief period, humans went from basic mechanical transportation to rudimentary space exploration. This rate of development is unprecedented among known species." Student Jiho, whose crystalline body sparkled under the classroom lights, raised an appendage. "But Professor, many species develop rapidly once they discover key scientific principles."
"True," Tahoe acknowledged, "but what makes humans unique is the driving force behind their development."
Notice these markers on the timeline. Red dots appeared along the technological progression line. Each red dot represents a major armed conflict between human groups. Now observe the relationship between these conflicts and technological leaps.
The students fell silent as they saw the clear pattern. Major technological advances almost always occurred during or immediately after periods of warfare. Humans developed nuclear energy, jet propulsion, early computing, spaceflight, and countless medical advances primarily through war efforts, Tahoe explained. Where most species experience technological regression during conflicts due to resource destruction, humans experience technological acceleration. The display shifted to show Earth's early space vehicles alongside modern Confederation ships. When humans were first discovered, Confederation scientists dismissed their technology as primitive. Their ships seemed slow, inefficient, and fragile. But what most failed to consider was the speed of human adaptation. Tahoe brought up a new document, a classified intelligence assessment. This report was commissioned after the Proxima incident. Intelligence analysts calculated how quickly humans might advance if given access to Confederation technology and motivated by military competition. The projection showed a simulation of human technological progression with access to advanced galactic science. The line climbed at a steep angle. The analysis projected that within 20 standard years of full technological exchange, humans would likely match or exceed current Confederation military technology. This conclusion was initially rejected as impossible until analysts demonstrated that humans had made similar leaps repeatedly in their own history. Student Mincio raised her tentacle. But humans are physically weak compared to many species. Their bodies are fragile, with no natural armor or weapons. An excellent observation, Professor Tahoe nodded. This led many to dismiss the potential threat. However, physical attributes are almost irrelevant in modern warfare. The display showed footage of the human mercenaries again, this time focusing on their equipment. Even with their primitive technology, humans had already begun developing mechanized combat assistance. Observe how they compensate for physical limitations through technological solutions. The footage showed humans using simple machines to enhance their lifting capacity, protective gear to compensate for their soft bodies, and distance weapons to offset their limited natural strength. Intelligence analysts identified a concerning pattern in human military development, Tahoe continued. When faced with a physical disadvantage, humans don't accept limitation, they design around it. They create tools specifically to overcome their natural weaknesses. The professor switched to a different document, this one marked with the highest security classification. This is perhaps the most disturbing discovery from the human historical record. Roughly 80 years before they achieved spaceflight, humans developed weapons capable of destroying their entire civilization. The display showed historical footage of nuclear tests on Earth, mushroom clouds rising into the atmosphere. No other known species has ever created weapons that could potentially cause their own extinction before they developed the ability to leave their planet, Tahoe said quietly. Student Hyunjin, who had been unusually silent, finally spoke. Were they insane? Not insane, Tahoe corrected. Just willing to accept levels of risk that other species find unthinkable. Humans call it pushing boundaries. The professor moved to the final section of this part of his lecture. The Confederation Security Council's ultimate concern was this: if humans approach warfare as both a psychological reward and a driver of innovation, what would happen if they were given unrestricted access to galactic-level technology and motivated by interspecies conflict? The holographic display showed a simulation of space battles with increasingly advanced human ships. The simulation suggested that human military development would follow an exponential rather than linear path. Their psychological comfort with risk, combined with their history of rapid wartime innovation, created what security analysts called the perfect adaptive military species. Tahoe dimmed the hologram slightly. And this is why, despite their seemingly primitive technology and physical limitations, humans were classified as a potential Class 1 military threat, the only non-spacefaring species ever to receive such a designation. The classroom had grown unusually quiet. Even the typically restless species like the Veldarian students, who normally shifted positions constantly, sat perfectly still. Professor Tahoe looked around at his students, noting their various expressions of concern, fascination, and disbelief. We now arrive at the final and most important part of today's lesson, Tahoe said, his tentacles moving to the holographic controls. The creation of the Terran exclusion protocols. The display showed a formal gathering of the Confederation High Council. 83 representatives from different member species sat in the Grand Circular Chamber. The timestamp indicated this meeting occurred 3 months after the Proxima incident. This emergency session was called specifically to address what many council members called the human question, Tejo explained.
What should be done about a species with such unique and potentially dangerous characteristics? Student Mina raised her hand. Professor, if humans were so dangerous, why not simply avoid contact with them entirely? Another excellent question, Tejo nodded. That option was indeed proposed, as you'll see.
The hologram showed various council members speaking.
Their words appeared as translated text at the bottom of the display.
Several factions emerged, Tejo continued.
The Isolation faction, led by Ambassador Seo Jun, advocated complete quarantine of Earth.
They proposed monitoring stations around the solar system to ensure humans remained contained. The display showed the stern face of Ambassador Seo Jun, a tall, thin being with iridescent scales.
This species represents an unprecedented risk.
Their psychology makes them uniquely suited to warfare. Their history shows a pattern of violent expansion.
Containment is the only reasonable option. The second faction, Tejo continued, was the Engagement faction, led by Science Director Ji-hun.
The hologram shifted to show a different council member with 4 arms and bioluminescent patches that glowed as he spoke. We cannot judge an entire species based on military potential alone, Ji-hun argued.
Human creativity and adaptability could benefit the entire Confederation if properly directed.
Yes, they have warlike tendencies, but they also created remarkable art, literature, and philosophy despite their violent history.
Student Jaiwo clicked her mandibles curiously. Which faction won the debate?
Neither, Tejo replied.
After 30 days of deliberation, a compromise was proposed by strategic analyst Hyarin.
The display showed a small, feathered being addressing the council. Her voice was soft but firm.
We need neither complete isolation nor unrestricted engagement, Hyarin stated.
What we need is controlled integration with specific restrictions.
The hologram showed her presentation a detailed plan that would eventually become the Terran exclusion protocols.
The compromise was elegant, Professor Tejo explained.
Humans would be welcomed into the galactic community.
They would be allowed to trade, travel, and share cultural and scientific knowledge. But they would be permanently banned from participating in Confederation military operations and from receiving advanced weapons technology. The display showed the official document with the Council's seal, the first draft of the Terran exclusion protocols. To make this palatable to humans, Tejo continued, the restriction was presented as protection for a developing species rather than containment of a potential threat. Official records stated that humans were excluded from military service because they were too primitive to understand the complexities of interstellar warfare.
Student Dongo raised his wing. But wouldn't humans eventually realize the truth? They seem quite perceptive.
Indeed, Tejo agreed.
The Council anticipated this possibility.
That's why the protocols included extensive cultural exchange programs highlighting the horrors of past galactic conflicts. The goal was to gradually shift human psychology away from its comfort with warfare. The professor moved to the next display, statistics on human integration into Confederation society over the past 70 years.
The results have been largely successful. Humans have become valuable members of the Confederation.
Their natural creativity and problem-solving abilities have contributed significantly to medicine, entertainment, and environmental science.
Student Suman looked troubled. But we're essentially lying to an entire species, Professor. Is that ethical?
Professor Tejo's tentacles curl thoughtfully.
Ethics across species is always complicated.
The Council viewed it as choosing between potential extinction-level conflict and a beneficial deception. They chose the path that preserved life. The final display showed human representatives accepting their official membership into the Confederation, unaware of the real reasons behind the military restrictions placed upon them. What you've learned today must remain within this classroom, Tejo reminded them. The protocols work precisely because humans believe they are being protected rather than contained. If this information became widely known, it could trigger exactly the type of human response the Confederation fears.
Student Jungo raised a tentacle. Professor, do you ever worry that humans might one day discover the truth anyway?
Professor Tejo was silent for a moment before answering. That possibility keeps many in Confederation leadership awake at night, he finally admitted. The hope is that by the time humans might discover the truth, their integration into galactic society will have shifted their psychological relationship with warfare. He looked around the classroom at his students. Remember this lesson when you interact with humans. What appears as a friendly, creative, slightly primitive species carries within it the potential to become the most formidable military force the galaxy has ever known. The protocols don't exist to protect humans from us. They exist to protect the galaxy from what humans might become if their remarkable adaptability were ever fully turned toward warfare again.